So it is January, middle of January 2022, and I am going to talk about some of the seeds that we're going to have available spring of 2022 for people to purchase. We'll be at the farmers market. As far as I know, we're also going to be at Pine Forest on Saturdays, starting the day before the farmers market, so that would be April 30th, I believe. And then we will also, you can also order by just calling us if you would like to. We always are open for appointments. So the idea behind this, I originally wanted it to be a seed co-op, but it is very difficult. Seed selling is not a terribly profitable thing. But the idea behind this, for me at least, was, during the pandemic, there were seed shortages where if you were a gardener, you likely experienced that you weren't able to get certain varieties or certain seeds for plants that you were used to growing or you wanted to try growing. And I experienced that as well. So that caused me to want to make sure that we were producing at least some of our seeds locally. I know that there are also seed banks through a couple different organizations that are reasonably local. So like the Master Gardener program, they've got a seed library. So that would be something that would probably be worth looking into if you were looking for local seed as well. I'll show you this as well, because we don't have, this is just starting, this is our first year, so we've got a lot of cool stuff, and we've got a lot of native stuff as well, but we definitely don't have enough where it was like if you were going to have a full-fledged garden, you would be able to have probably all the varieties of things that you wanted. So this is kind of my example. This is Seed Savers Exchange. I order enough seeds that they send me these pretty magazines, but of course you can always just go on their website. I know people that will also order through several different companies that have, most companies will have heirloom open pollinated seeds, or if you're fine with hybrid seeds as well. Another one that I have used has been, rareseeds.com. Baker Creek is that company. I know Johnny Select Seeds is a really popular one for some of the local farmers. So those are things to keep in mind. This is the time of year that I usually go ahead and make sure that I've ordered all of my seeds, because it's before the big rush, and it's also just really nice in the middle of winter if you're a gardener to be looking at all of these like pretty plants that you're going to grow in the spring, because it kind of makes it easier to get through the lack of green in the winter. So without further ado, I'll just let you know this is kind of mixed in a lot of stuff that's both native stuff and then our herbs and then our veggies. So I apologize if you're just interested in one. I don't have it perfectly well organized at the moment, so I'm just going to go through them all. So this is Purple Opal Basil. This was the last of the stickers that I had for this. But Purple Opal Basil I really like, just because I think it's a really pretty basil. It's got like a really dark purple color, and I also really like it because I had a freeze come through and it killed all of my green basil, but it didn't kill my purple basil. And I'm sure that part of that just has to do with the fact that the darker leaves probably absorb more sunlight and keep more heat at night, but they do appear to be more cold hardy. So we do have some of that. We'll also grow those for sale. Buttercrunch Lettuce. We're getting fancy with our labels now. This guy is just kind of a standard for me. They're really easy. It's easy to grow. You can either harvest a whole head or you can pick. I usually just pull the leaves from the base as it grows. And it's just a really easy, and it'll self-seed again, variety of lettuce. Love Lies Bleeding Amaranth. So this is more of like an ornamental, but it is a food producer. And it actually tastes pretty good. I think some people will just grow it for the birds because the birds really like amaranth. And then this is not like the pokey wild amaranth. So you don't have to worry about it like getting stickers in your socks. It's just like a really pretty drapey red amaranth. Lemon balm. Oh my god. Lemon balm. I really enjoy lemon balm, and it's perennial here. All of these are perennial plants except for the veggies. So all the herbs are perennial here except for basil. Yeah, just to let you know, because it's nice to be able to plant some things that'll come back year after year, and lemon balm is really nice. I use it in salves and teas and things, so, and it just smells really nice when you have it in your garden and you walk by. Getting into some of our native stuff, we've got wild iris seeds, which if you've ever been hiking around the base of the peaks or up on the peaks and seen them in bloom, they're absolutely gorgeous. Aunt Molly's ground cherry. It's another one that we're gonna do that we have plenty of this year. I have a lot more seeds than a lot of these too, so don't count the packets and think that we don't have much. Aunt Molly's ground cherry, I had never grown these before last year, and I just thought that they would be interesting to try, and it turned out that my son really, really enjoys them. Because when they look a lot like a tomatillo, but they're smaller and really sweet if you let them like fully cure. So usually you'll let them fall off and then you'll wait like a week or so before you eat them if you want them to be like all the way sweet. But he really enjoyed like peeling them open and eating them. He got a kick out of that. So we're going to be growing more of those this year. They're easy to grow. Unlike tomatillos, you don't have to have two in order for them to pollinate. You can have just one, which is really nice. And they're like reasonably compact. They get, you know, like 2 or 3 feet across if you water them well. And they produce a lot of fruit really early. So they produce before all of my cherry tomatoes. So that was really nice. Feverfew is another perennial herb that we're growing. That we're growing and we have seed for. So Feverfew is medicinal, but it's also just a really pretty, they have like clusters of these like tiny little daisy flowers, and they do spread in areas where they have humidity to do that. So if you put them in a garden bed and that's an area that you're irrigating, they will spread in your garden bed. So that's really nice if you like them, and probably not great if you don't. They're also used medicinally for people who have chronic headaches, but I'm not gonna go into that too much because of course with anything like that it's good to, you know, ask a professional herbalist, which I am not. Okay, so Rocky Mountain bee plant, see that? For anybody who was driving through anywhere in Donny Park last monsoon season, this is the purple that you saw everywhere in that area. We had like a huge boom of Rocky Mountain bee plant last year, and it was absolutely gorgeous. So they're a wonderful plant for areas that you need to restore, areas that are like disturbed soil. So they really like disturbed soil, and they're really great for nitrogen fixing. So I will usually suggest, if you have an area that has some soil problems or is really bare, or you have a lot of weeds, you can pull the weeds out and put something else in. Sunflowers and Rocky Mountain bee plant, those are the things that I always see in areas that seem to be successfully moving back to more of a native vegetation. And of course, I always suggest putting in some grass as well. We will have, I'm gonna bring like a big old bin of blue grama grass seed that you can buy by, I'll probably bag it up as small as like 1/8 of a pound for people to buy. And I always suggest putting grass in there too. Oh, there's more Rocky Mountain bee plant. Globe mallow. This is, I don't know if it's my all-time favorite, but I love Globe Mallow. Some people really dislike it because it will like spread in your yard and take over, and our whole backyard is almost completely Globe Mallow right now. That'll probably change. It doesn't seem to like persist forever. It's like part of like the change in vegetation stages, because that was previously a really barren area. So it's probably about 2 feet tall, and then mid to late summer it's just totally covered in these like coral orange flowers that are probably about yay big, and I really like them. Alrighty, Chimayo Chili. So these guys, I was introduced to these by a woman I knew who grew out in, she lived off of 151 out at the base of the peaks, and so she grew mostly really cold hardy things. Oh, here's the dog. These are high elevation chilies that are native to New Mexico, and they are like a pepper chili. Like a ground pepper chili, as opposed to like something that you would cut open and put cheese in and make a chili relleno out of. You can also probably put them in soups and things whole. And they have kind of a smoky flavor, so if you looked them up online you would probably find like gourmet chili powder stuff. But yeah, so they're good for high elevation. They seem to be more cold tolerant than any other pepper variety that I know of, and they're pretty prolific as well. These are the only peppers that I've had like a decent amount of luck with in Flagstaff. Part of that has to do with the fact that I'm like pretty unwilling to put in a whole lot of effort to like protect things excessively. Some people have a lot of luck with peppers here, but usually they have like a system, and I'm just not willing to go to that length. I like things that'll just do well here without a whole bunch of extra effort. Okay, so we also have some horsetail milkweed seeds, which this is the milkweed that you'll see around most of Flagstaff growing wild, or at least that I have seen mostly. I also see butterfly milkweed, the orange flowering one, growing wild in this area, but this is the white flowering one with like the narrow leaves, and it spreads pretty prolifically. It just seems to be the most bulletproof milkweed, and we're also going to be growing a bunch of these this year, because I just think a lot of people have been trying to grow milkweeds and they're a little hit or miss on transplanting, and then some of them require a lot of water. These ones are really drought tolerant and they just seem to do well. They're not as showy, but if you're really looking to get some milkweed in your garden and you've been struggling in the past, then I think these would be a really good bet. Of course, hollyhocks. Everyone I know loves hollyhocks. We're going to be growing black hollyhocks for sale, but these are pink hollyhock seeds. And hollyhocks are really easy to grow from seeds. I, for a long time, wouldn't sell hollyhock seeds because I was like, you can go pick them off of the hollyhocks that are all over Flagstaff. But really, if it's like, if you didn't collect them last fall and spring is here and you want to grow some hollyhocks in your yard, we have the seed for you to do it if you want to go ahead and do it, and it won't be too spendy. Alrighty. Silver Lupin. This is another one of my favorites, also a nitrogen fixer. You'll see these all over the forest, usually like partially shaded areas that get maybe a little bit more water than other places in town. But they are very easy to grow. They're really pretty. What's not to like? I also have Larkspur. This is geranium leaf Larkspur. I did not put that on here. I should have put the scientific name, but at the time I was more concerned about cautioning people that they are toxic, which a lot of our native plants are toxic, but it's not generally an issue. I mean, any Larkspur that you go to the other nurseries and purchase is also toxic. It's just you know, most of the time you don't really need to worry about anything eating your flowers. Same with like columbine. Columbine's toxic. Nobody really worries about it. But I do always make sure that people know whenever I sell anything that's potentially toxic that it is, especially when it's toxic to this level. Just in case somebody has like a pet that is like abnormally interested in your garden additions, or if you have kids and you're just really worried that they might eat something, so you don't want anything toxic in your yard. Paintbrush. So this I did collect locally off my father-in-law's property. There are a lot of species of paintbrush. I am not a botanist, I am a horticulturalist, so I did not say what species it is because I'm not positive, but I know it does well here because it grows here. The only caveat to this is you need to make sure to plant it in with blue grama grass because it is a parasitic plant, but it is really beautiful if you can get it going, and it'll spread in an area if it's happy. Alrighty. Native sunflowers, so that one's easy. These are really, there are several native sunflower varieties that grow around here. This is Helianthus Anise, so it's kind of like the most common sunflower that you'll find west of Kansas, I guess. And beautiful, easy to grow. I usually will throw a bunch of seeds in our yard every single year, and then I don't do anything with them, and they just come up and we have sunflowers. So they also help clean the soil. If you have, we had our yard was basically an automotive lot, so they were just dumping oil onto the ground. So we've been kind of like trying to rehab the soil, and of course sunflowers are a great way to do that. So we do lots of sunflowers all the time. They're also really great for pollinators, so easy pollinator support option. Sunset Crater Penstemon. So this one is mostly cool because it's like, it's an endemic species, so it only grows here, which is just kind of neat to grow things that you're not going to see anywhere else. I don't know if it's technically considered endangered anymore. I know it was. That's arguably because we're kind of in a special climate location, so they wouldn't grow in a lot of other places. But of course you wouldn't want to go out and dig them up. I think it's illegal to do that, even if you have a permit to go wilding. Penstemons are kind of notoriously a little difficult to get going. These guys need really well-drained soil. They usually grow in areas with a lot of cinder. So keep that in mind if you want to get them going. A lot of these things are going to need cold stratification, a lot of our native stuff. Just keep that in mind. They do need some amount of chilling period before they'll germinate. So if you ask me about it, I know what most of them are, but if you come and you just buy a bunch of packets of seed, I'm not going to go through each one unless you ask me to let you know. I do have lists, and you might be able to check, I don't know, Native Plant and Seed is where I got a lot of my information on that. They might still have lists of how to treat seeds available on their website, but I'm not positive on that. Otherwise, I also use Western Native Seed. They'll usually, if they have the seed variety, they'll tell you if you need to treat it. And Plants of the Southwest is another good resource for that. They have a lot of different seed varieties, and they'll tell you what they do in order to get them to germinate. Different people will say different things. Things have worked for me that supposedly haven't worked for others or are not suggested in the literature. So, but I've never been able to get good germination on any penstemon without cold stratifying it for at least a month. I do have videos on cold stratification. I will try to remember to link in the description below. Okay. We have white yarrow, which is our native yarrow variety. I have a big patch of this in the backyard that I don't really do anything to take care of. And I like it ornamentally. I think it's really pretty. And then I also use it medicinally. So I'll put it in salves, I'll use it in teas. I also was really surprised this last year. I came out on a really beautiful morning after we had had a rain the day before, so it was nice and humid, and I guess the flowers had just opened up, and it was the first time that I could say that I had like, I got like an overwhelming waft of like yarrow flower smell, and it was really nice, but I don't feel like I would generally call them super fragrant, but they do smell really nice. Okay, we're getting down to some more of the veggies. So this is black cherry tomato, and these were suggested to me by a fellow who told me that they produced really early for him and that they were more cold tolerant than any of his other tomato varieties. This year I am going to be selling mostly cherry tomatoes. I'm gonna grow probably some Rutgers tomatoes, and I'll probably pick another like standard size tomato. But at least for myself personally, I have found that because of how short our growing season is, unless you have a greenhouse, you're just not gonna get very many red tomatoes if you grow full-size tomatoes here, unless you buy like a really big plant at the start of the season. And at least for me, I don't like to, while I'm growing a lot of the plants myself, I'm not gonna spend a whole lot of money like heating a space to get the tomato plants to be like huge before I put them in the ground. And I'm kind of assuming that most people don't want to spend like $30 on a tomato plant just so that they can have like an extra 2 or 3 weeks of tomato production. So with cherry tomatoes, you're gonna get tomatoes starting like 3 weeks earlier, 2 or 3 weeks earlier, depending on how quickly they produce. So we're gonna go hard on the cherry tomatoes this year for folks, because I think that people will just enjoy being able to actually get a good harvest. On that note, Sunrise Bumblebee cherry tomatoes. I was really pleased with these. I didn't pick the best picture for this, so they're really pretty. They're like yellow with orange stripes on them. And they're really tasty. They're roughly 70 days to harvest, so they're a little bit longer than the black cherry tomatoes. They are indeterminate tomatoes like the black cherry tomatoes, so they'll just grow and grow and grow. But they're very tasty, and they're a little bigger than some of the other cherry tomato varieties. Okay, so fennel. I'm not sure what variety of fennel this is. Probably most likely Florence fennel, which is the variety that people grow for bulbs. But I guess they don't really, it's difficult to get them to bulb in Flagstaff because we don't have a very long growing season, and there's like transplanting and things involved in trying to get them to do that. I have a fennel plant in my yard that's probably 15 years old, and I just use the leaves, and it's got the same flavor. It's just not gonna do for if you wanted to make like a fennel bulb soup. They're also great for pollinators. It's just nice to have perennial herbs in your garden, so that's a good option for that. So next on the list, garlic chives. So garlic chives are pretty different in appearance from like regular chives. They seem to grow less bunched unless you really put an effort into making sure your seeds are planted close together. I really like them for 2 reasons though. So of course, because they're an edible herb that's drought tolerant. That is wonderful, and perennial. But the other reason that I really like them is they're the only thing that I really have growing that will bloom late in the fall. So we've got a bunch of it in our front yard, and come probably September into October maybe, well, probably like August, September, and then it starts to seed in October. We just have all of these really pretty little white flowers in the front, so that's nice. Lovage is another one that we're growing. I use this as a substitute for parsley and celery, since celery is kind of too, it requires a longer growing season than what we have. And this is perennial, and it'll get like 3 or 4 feet tall. It'll be kind of like a bush even. And then it dies all the way back to the ground at the end of the season, so you don't have to feel bad about using it. It's also supposed to be highly medicinal, so I think especially for like digestive things. So it's got a lot of really good uses. So that's something to consider, maybe putting in your perennial bed. We also have Emily Basil, which I grew quite a bit of this last year and I really liked. It's just kind of a standard green basil with nice big leaves. I have rhubarb. This is like the red stemmed rhubarb, which does fantastically well in Flagstaff. So I always suggest it to people. I've had issues with grasshoppers really going after it sometimes, but it seems to just always come back. It's really hardy. It's pretty drought tolerant. If you water it a lot, it'll get huge. It'll get like 4 feet across and 4 feet tall. And if you like making jams and pies, then you know it's a nice thing to have in your yard. Lambert's local weed, another one that's toxic but really pretty. So if you have livestock, do not grow this because they may eat it. It's toxic to them and it's also addictive. So I don't know if it's that they experience some sort of hallucinogenic something from it, but they will seek it out and try and eat it, and it can kill them. So no for the livestock, but it is really beautiful, and I grew up with it growing all around the house. So you know, I'm just used to it as a really pretty flower. Again, it's a nitrogen fixer, so that's really nice as well. This is probably my favorite, so it's nice to end on it. Desert 4 o'clock. So when I first saw this plant, I thought that it must not be there, like it had to be like some invasive species or something, just because it was so big and so beautiful and so leafy green and doing so well. As it turns out, they tend to do really well some years and then stay really small others. But they can be like 3 feet wide or 4 feet wide. They tend to be a little lower growing, so probably like 2 feet tall. And they will just be completely covered in these like purple magenta flowers, probably like midsummer. This last year, when we had that really good rain, I have never seen so many desert 4 o'clocks in my life, which just was evidence that a lot of them kind of stay dormant or don't produce much foliage or any flowers some years. If you're growing them in your garden, which they're pretty easy to grow from seed, if they're getting water, some amount of water every year, then they're gonna be nice and produce. It takes a few years for them to start really getting nice and big. I think we have one in our yard that got really nice and big this year, and it took about 3 years for it to get properly established to do that. But it's definitely one of those like really cool things when you come across it in like a super dry desert area and there's just this big beautiful lush plant covered in flowers. So I would suggest growing it. So that's all the seeds that I have right now that are packaged for us to go ahead and sell in the spring. So that doesn't mean that that's all the seeds that we have. If you were looking for a seed variety that you couldn't find anywhere else, there is a chance that we have seed for it. So you can go ahead and contact me if you're looking for something special that you can't find somewhere else, or if you just want to go with like local seed source. But I am hoping that over the course of the next several years, depending on how this goes, depending on how much effort and labor I can put into doing it, that we're going to have more seed varieties.